What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we are going to go over the NFL Combine that finished this just yesterday. A lot of good stuff happened. We're going to have a lot of winners. How we're going to do this, we're going to do day 1 through day 4. We're going to talk about the winners from each day and then also the losers from each day. A lot of good winners. But there are some very significant losers also that we'll get to. So a lot of fun players, though. So, yeah.
Right. And a lot of people at top that are at least projected, among the top of their position or in the first round, in the top half at least, a lot of them actually didn't participate in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Not only just a 40 or a vertical, but also a lot of, on-field drills, which was very interesting to see. But it left a lot of room for opportunity for other guys to really take advantage of. And we saw some really athletic dudes just kill it this week.
Yeah, like I said in prior videos, if you're a combine king, you should test at the combine. If you're not going to be good at the combine, don't test at the combine. It's kind of one of those things. So make sure you kind of put these types of things in buckets. And when we get to quarterbacks and other positions, we'll kind of go into the whole position a little bit. But let's start off with day 1. Day 1 was the edge defensive tackles or defensive linemen, and then the linebackers. The biggest winners from this day. And we talked about Shamar Stewart on a previous episode. I said even if he runs a 4.5 and jumps a 40-inch vertical, whatever, jumps 11 feet in the broad jump, which he did not do. He only had 10. He had 10 foot 11 inches, so pretty dang close. But even if he did all that, it wasn't going to necessarily change my view on him. But he's absolutely a winner. When it comes to just he had the score. Let me go back. The points up there, so you see how he has a 10.00 next to his name. Those are the relative athletic scores. I pulled the relative athletic scores for everybody that did the combine. So you kind of have an idea of how they did based on their position and all of the other people that have done this before. He had a 10.00. He is the number 1 edge all time, I believe.
Yeah, since 1987, out of 1,802 defensive ends or edge rushers.
Right.
He's the first and only 10.0. First and only to do that so far. 4.59 40, 10.11 broad, like you mentioned, and a 40-inch vert. But we expected him to kill it in the thing, and the whole thing is just why wasn't the production there? Because he's just kind of one of those epitome of pure risk, because he might be vaulting in front of a lot of guys that really produced, and he just doesn't have that, but he's got the athleticism that you would hope that could translate. But we've seen time and time again where these types of guys get overdrafted and don't pan out, and it's one of those scary things that we saw that coming. So it shouldn't make him rise significantly for anybody's. And if they do make him rise or jump as far as they do, then it's you didn't do much work on him then, or on that edge class in particular, because he should have already been there, because you should have anticipated some kind of leap. Maybe, a 10.0, that might give him a slight edge, but I don't know if overall we just put out our, first
big board
top 50.
He won't.
Yeah, he might go up a couple spots, but it's not like we're gonna not treat him like a back-end first rounder because of the lack of production.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to just add is Xavier Worthy last year. Everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, you broke the record." Well, we expected him to run in the low 4.2s. That wasn't surprising. So this is kind of that similar thing where, we have a guy that we expect to do things athletically well, and then he does them, and it shouldn't shock anybody. Of course, we want to talk about it. It's a really awesome thing. It didn't come out of the blue, but it's still really cool to see. It's really great that he was still capable of making these things happen. I'm not going to take away from that, but the production matters just as much, and the film matters. When you do scouting, film should be at least 75% of it. And if it's not, you're doing something wrong. If you're gonna jump, say Shamar's in your 30s and he jumps into your teens, you're probably not really doing a very good job prior to the combine process, basically.
Right.
The next guy, a guy that he could jump over for some people, is James Pierce Jr. Some people already have him above him, and some people, have James Pierce higher. We actually have James Pierce much higher. He got the number 1 40 this weekend at 4.47 for the edge group, and that was really impressive. He was moving. He is 6'5", a little bit over 6'5". He's just a guy that wasn't that amazing in the vert or the jumps, but the 40 kind of tells exactly what you expected out of him too. He's only 245 pounds. running that 40 was exactly what he needed to do to kind of just like make his name as like I'm a top 5 edge no matter whose board I'm on.
Right, and he's kind of all over the place a little bit. There was some reports right before the combine even started that his stock could be falling a little bit due to character concerns or off field issues, which a lot of those times it's kind of like give or take. But at the same time, guys like Randy Gregory, if you remember way back when, obviously
very similar.
Weed was a very different, ball game a decade ago, let alone. But he was a top 5 projected pick that fell the second round because of the fact that people didn't want to touch him because of multiple character concerns, and then it just never seemed like he reached the potential that he should have.
James Pierce and him have similar body types and play very similarly. I was a big fan of Randy Gregory's film coming out, so like I completely understand like if there are real character concerns, and we haven't gotten enough information on that, so we can't just like say it, but if there are, he is a guy we can talk about in that same exact light as Randy Gregory because they are so similar as players. The next guy, Donovan Ezeraku, he didn't run the 40, but he was very explosive. He had elite agility scores, 10.0 agility scores, 4.19 shuttle, and a 6.943 cone. That's just blazing. I think he had like a 0.2 better than everybody else basically at the position, which is just, he is a very good athlete. Braden Swenson was the only one within 0.2 of him basically on the shuttle. And then on the 3 cone, he was the only one under 7. So it kind of tells you where he's at for those types of things. And he didn't jump well, or he didn't jump amazingly. He didn't jump badly. And his RAS score is only an 8.03, and that's because of those jumps and not running the 40. But he's a really well put together player, and showing his agility laterally is a really good thing for him. I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah, he did. I know on our big board, he was, just outside of the top, 35, which, usually fringe first round range. Do you think he's risen enough to basically not be a lock of a first rounder, but be worthy of that selection if he indeed does go in the back end?
He's absolutely in the conversation for first rounder. When we redo our big board, we'll release our edge rankings before that, and we'll probably talk about where these guys are.
Yeah, because he's smack dab in the middle of about 7 or 8 guys.
There's so many
15 of each other.
There's so many good players in this edge class, truly. And so we'll talk about like if I think like he's moved up into that first round conversation, because he's in the conversation. It's just has he like vaulted himself where he's 26 to the Rams. Mm-hmm. Why not? Stuff like that. But yeah, he's super he's super productive. 16.5 sacks this year kind of tells you the thing. And it's the other side of it. Like you have Shamar, not a great like production, but great athlete. Donovan Ezeraku, only an 8 on his RAS score, but is got the production of 16.5 sacks. So he's a little bit different in that way. But he's an exciting player, and they're very close in that range for us on our edge rankings. Defensive lineman, there's 2 of them up here. Anais Peebles out of Virginia Tech. He ran a 4.94, and that is just awesome for especially for his build and what you'd expect out of him. Like that shows his explosiveness and stuff like that. He is one of the bigger risers from like the third to fourth round that we're going to be talking about. And then right after him is Ty Robinson. Ty Robinson had a very high RAS score, one of the most athletic for his position build. He was 6'5", 288, good arm length, and he basically was first in almost every single athletic skill. So that was really cool to see for the defensive tackle spot.
Yeah, he absolutely killed it. Definitely both should be rising. Obviously, when we put out our next board, it's going to be top 75, or are we going all the way to 100?
We'll do 100.
100. Yeah, so yeah, we'll go all the way to 100, which neither of these guys did make the top 50, but they for sure will be on the top 100, and we'll see how high they even rise from there. If you'll just have to check out our interior defensive line rankings, because again, Emory has been on record for saying that this is the best class in the decade. So it is very, very rich with talent, and these 2 guys kind of make up right smack dab in the middle of it.
And that talent, funny enough, didn't even perform at the combine. Like Cam was saying earlier, like a lot of them didn't even go to the combine. So we got a lot less players than was kind of expected for this position, and that allowed a guy like Ty Robinson, who was probably a fifth, maybe sixth rounder, probably sixth rounder, to vault himself into the third round conversation because of what he did. It's definitely a fun thing because he had to check some boxes, and he's an ex-wrestler, so he has that, and now he's got the athleticism, and he showed some good stuff on tape, so he should be climbing. He is on the watch board, so I've already watched him, but I didn't think he was, a top 15 defensive tackle necessarily because his class is so deep. So I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch some more tape. So that's a really good thing with Combine is we find more players to dig into basically at this point in the year.
Right.
And then there's some losers, and we're gonna have 3 losers right now. Kyle Kennard's a loser because he did lack some athleticism that I'm lower on him, and I was already lower on him, but I think now the general public is also going to follow, basically. 4.73 40-yard dash. I mean, with this class and how deep and how good this class is, I feel like you're going to try to bet more on upside, and his 40 and things like that are just going to hold him down a little bit more than maybe he would if he was in a lighter class, basically.
Yeah, he's just kind of I guess on the outside looking in from such a deep class of edges. But yeah, there was just several guys that were, 15, 25 pounds, bigger that were able to run faster and look bigger and stronger. And obviously he was still productive in 2024. He had 11.5 sacks, but you have to do more to not just be some rotational piece going into the NFL. Like you need to, establish yourself to become a starter and actually every down player. We'll see if he kind of can continue to show that, but a pro day will be a big stepping point for him if he can turn things around.
Plus, he's a little bit older, which doesn't help either. I'm not here to dog on the Iowa Hawkeyes. I'm really not. Okay, there's more than just 2 on this list. You can see 2 now, but we'll talk about another one in a little bit. But they just had bad days. They just had really bad days. Yaya Black, he was one of the worst at every single drill. Just like every time, all his times were bad. 5.39 is the worst of any defensive lineman. And the 40, his vert was a 25.5, and then his broad was only 8 feet and a half. It's just not, or 8.5, so basically 8.5 feet. And then his shuttle was only 4.72. Like there were just a lot of deficiencies in the athleticism department for a guy that was kind of fighting to not be, out of the draft completely. Mm-hmm. And maybe he could have vaulted himself, up or just fallen out completely, and I really have a hard time thinking he's just gonna not be a sixth, seventh round flyer or an undrafted free agent, basically. Mm-hmm. So
that's almost what Jay Higgins is also on the verge of becoming because he's just really let it down based on his athleticism.
Love Jay Higgins though. Yeah. It's so sad because he's so good at football, but he is so unathletic, and the league is just built on athletes, and we just can't. We can't have a 3.62, Jay. He was, he was 0.09 worse than everybody in the 40, at the position, at a 4.82.
That's all.
I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help him at that point because that's just so bad. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Iowa.
He's been a productive linebacker on, one of the better defenses over the country over the last couple of years. But at the same time, you have to do more for yourself to warrant a, high draft selection, and he's really fallen for sure into day 3, but he's gonna wait all day kind of thing to get his name called. But at the end of the day, he's such a good football player that at the end of the day, we could just look back on this in a couple of years and be like, okay, why did we let him fall the 7th round or undrafted or however low he falls? Because he's a guy that is coming off of back-to-back seasons where he combined for over 300 tackles.
Yeah.
So.
He's a 2-time All-American.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
He's small, but he also doesn't have the athleticism to, combat that. So it's just one of those things that you're just betting on, him just having the raw talent.
Right.
So it's one of those things that it's not going to be helpful, but maybe in a few years from now, it just won't matter.
Yeah, we hope so. I mean, like I said, I really like Jay Higgins, and I hope he will be on our honorable mentions minimum because I'm not going to leave him off the linebacker video, but it's just hard to see him, just making waves at this point. So, day 2, guys, the winners, and this is the athletes for the defensive side of the ball, the cornerbacks, safeties, and tight ends. we'll talk about two of the first two athletes right here in Maxwell Hairston and Darren Porter, two fastest 40s. Sorry, two of the top 3 40s on the weekend, the two fastest 40s for the corners, and a 4.28 for Maxwell and a 4.3 flat for Darren Porter. Darren Porter is a unicorn. First off, that 9.99, I'm surprised he didn't also get a 10 for his RAS score because he is such a good athlete. And Maxwell Hairston really stood out, not just in the 40, and we tweeted this the other day, but he stood out in how smooth he looked in all of his drills work, because I was surprised. Of course the running fast is fine, whatever, but it's how can you use it in a game, and he looked so smooth. And that was what really was like, okay, I have to really, really think about how far up this guy could be in our cornerback rankings, because he did so well. And he wasn't in our top 50 originally, so he might be a guy that could get in it.
Yeah, and he was also a guy that in our first mock, when we were doing, putting it together off air, we were really considering him on the back end of the first round as a selection, which, I mean, going into the combine, others were higher on him than we were, but I think the gap is going to close a little bit on him. Depends on how high he will rise, but yeah, he really stood out among a lot of names, which we've talked about on other videos, that just so many cornerbacks that are top in this class coming off of significant injuries. And then also other guys like, Travis Hunter, who said he would work out at corner,
right,
ended up not, which no shame, no harm, no foul on him, because he's an elite player. But yeah, just make the most of it if you can. Combines for players that can stand out, and he truly did.
Yeah, and then so those are our guys that are going to be no matter what in our top 10 cornerbacks rankings. But the next two guys are guys that are really, I was excited to see, because I didn't expect this. Robert Longerbeam from Rutgers, he was very quick, very athletic, and then he had a 4.39 40, 1.5-2 split, and then he jumped an 11-foot broad. So just an absolute stud when it comes to his athleticism. But then also I really liked what he did in the actual drills themselves. That was good to see. And then Caleb Ransa was a 9.95 score. So he had a 4.33 40. He jumped a 40 in the vert, and he's another good athlete. So both of these guys really helped themselves in the process. And I actually haven't watched Robert Longerbeam as just like a prospect. So now I have to go back and do some digging, because I watched Caleb Ransom, but Robert Longerbeam, he's a 4-year starter. And I didn't even have, he's not even on most radars. So he's obviously going to jump into at least be a drafted player. And I thought that was really cool.
For sure. Yeah, but then also the I guess the big name on this, but maybe of this entire weekend, was Nick Manowari, the safety out of South Carolina. Again, you see a 10.0 relative athletic score. He absolutely killed it. He basically is Kyle Hamilton, but much faster and stronger more athletic. And yeah, he was incredibly, viral, so to speak. We even did a tweet that got retweeted by our buddy Warren Sharp, which is cool to see. But yeah, he looked phenomenal when he did his testing and his drills.
I do, yeah. So he looked, this is a guy that had to come and test and do crazy things. Mm-hmm. On film, I have more reservations, but at the end of the day, he can be taught how to do things. You know what I mean? Like right now, no one knows where he's going to play. Is he going to play free safety, strong safety? Is he going to be in the box? Is he going to be in slot? Is he going to, what is he going to do? Well, with these numbers, you can be like, I don't care, put him on my team. And that's kind of the thing, is like, okay, we can mold him into being a player that we want, more so than just maybe he had some things that we didn't love on film, but at the end of the day, he's still, 0 touchdowns to 4 interceptions type of guy that's willing to tackle and is this athletic. So I'll take him.
And then you put up a good point also on Twitter, how this is going to be a very interesting conversation and one to watch between him and Malachi Starks, because obviously those are the top 2 dogs at safety for most people. But Malachi obviously, doesn't have the athleticism that he does, but he has the tape and, the productivity. And so it's kind of one of those things of are people going to make him vault too high, or is it going to be one of those things where they give Malachi the benefit of the doubt, because he's been, long standing as a top 15-ish pick. that some people are starting to kind of tail off of because really there's not many teams that would be vying for a safety in the top 15. But I mean, between these two, they could be back to back or very close to one another in the draft. So it's going to be a very interesting topic to follow along the rest of the draft process.
I think if I remember correctly, Malachi also was the fastest in every single drill that was ran at the combine, which makes me think, obviously play speed versus like just 40 speed is a very different thing. I believe Malachi was in the 4.5s. I think he was a 4.5 flat for the position. So that kind of makes you think, okay, well, yeah, he was 4.5 flat on the dot. So, that kind of makes me think like, he might not be the best athlete, but at the same time, we're just still getting a guy that at least knows how to play football. And when it's between the lines, like he's going to be faster than he is on, just running a straight line. So next up, Terrence Ferguson, he basically won every single rep at the combine when it came to the 40, the vert. I think he won the broad too. So he's just, he had to go on this list. He's a 9.81 guy. He outdid all the other tight ends at the combine, and he was the best tight end that was there that actually went through. Because Tyler Warren, Colson Loveland, there was another one I wanted to say that did not participate, but there was a few guys that didn't participate that would have been, kind of rivaling him with the athletic scores. So I thought that putting him up there made a lot of sense.
Right, and I mean, obviously the first two tight ends are pretty consensus straight across the board of not only being the top two at their position, but as first round locks almost with Colston and Tyler Warren, which is why they didn't really participate in the drills. But everything else after that is kind of wide open, and we've seen like Elijah Arroyo killed at the Senior Bowl. That's why he's kind of risen. Harold Fannin had over 1,000 yards, and I think he was the single season
1,500
records.
Over 1,500
for a tight end in Division One. And then Gunnar Helm has just been a sneaky guy that he's one that didn't benefit himself that much this weekend, but somebody like Terrence Ferguson, who's kind of like just kind of waiting around, all of a sudden is finding himself right in the smack dab middle of the 3 to 6 range.
This is what we needed to see from Terrence Ferguson is he athletic too? Mm-hmm. Like this is the question mark that we had. The other person I was trying to say was Mason Taylor. He didn't participate in like the events, but he did the on-field work. And he had the best gauntlet by far of all of the tight ends. He ran straight down the line, caught the ball, didn't drop a single one. It looked really pretty. So Mason Taylor's another guy. But yeah, Terrence Ferguson, just by overall score and ability, I thought he looked really good. And then the losers. Gunnar Helm, who you mentioned. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw this, but Ian Rappaport actually reported it. He, on his first 40, he twisted his ankle. He has a sprained ankle. And it's black and blue, and it was on the first 40, and he's finished the day, obviously. So we got to see that, but it might have hindered him in the on-field workouts, the 40s. They already jumped the vertical in the broad. I don't believe it. So that was kind of another thing. So his vertical and his broad had already happened, or his vertical had already happened, which was a 30. So he still wasn't necessarily the best athlete, coming into that, but that could have even hindered him more and made it worse because he ran a 4.84, just not good.
Yeah, it's not good at all. But also, I've watched him he overtook because Amari Nyblack was supposed to be the starting tight end for Texas, and he was banged up to go into the year. Gunnar Helm just never gave the job back, and he looked well, and he just kind of came through in big moments. Mm-hmm. He doesn't, jump off the screen as a truly athletic guy, but he'll hurdle to some people.
No, yeah.
Like he made big plays down the field, and so he's not a guy that I worry about his athleticism, so to speak. He's just going to be there and do his job. But yeah, I mean, if he's going through injury, which, I didn't catch that by Ian Rappaport due to the slow testing, but hopefully it doesn't make him drop too much. But if it does, then somebody's going to get a very valuable tight end.
Yeah.
The third, fourth.
I think he's a really solid player, and he's a good blocker. That's his biggest. That's like his calling card. It's like he's willing to block, and some of these guys are more just finesse guys. The next guy up here is cornerback Zy Alexander from LSU. He had some of the worst testing I've seen for a cornerback that was supposed to have good testing, if that makes sense. Running a 4.56, 40, 31.5-inch vertical, and not less than a 10-foot broad. He had 31-inch arms, which is solid. He's a 6'1" guy, but I was really surprised that he was, really just unathletic. He like athletic compared to his peers. He was not nearly on their level, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he was just one of those guys, like you said, just didn't really jump off the screen like you would hope, especially coming from LSU, which typically, wide receivers, DBs typically stand out in the athleticism department. But I mean, again, pro days coming around the corner. They're going to be starting fairly soon. So hopefully he can turn it around.
Hopefully. And then, sorry, Iowa. I'm telling you, I'm not doing some of this. But
another one.
Yeah, Sebastian Castro, man. I mean, 3.32. Like, I can't not put them up here. Like, he was pretty awful. Like, it is what it is. And we know what Sebastian Castro really is. He's not supposed to be a flashy, fast guy. He's a good tackler, plays at the line of scrimmage. But, I mean, a 4.59. How is he going to play man coverage? And I'm not saying this because I did the Cam Kinchins thing. We were like, hey, this is really bad. Sebastian Castro kind of feels like that this year. He's kind of that guy that's going to be compared to, well, in our minds, because we did, talk so much about Cam Kinchins last year and how bad he did in the combine. Sebastian Castro kind of fits that same mold. Now, Cam Kinchins was good.
Yeah, he was one that was...
So I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, Kinchins, he was like also on the verge of being one of the top safeties in the class. So him having, which his 40 was even worse by a tenth plus. He was in the 4.7 range. But at the end of the day, he ended up making the most of it, and his productivity really translated in his first rookie year, which was solid to see, but it really truly took a toll on his draft stock. I believe he was a 5th rounder or late 4th.
Either 4th or 5th.
So, I mean, Sebastian coming into this wasn't really thought of as like a top 5 safety in this class, and if so, barely on the outside of that. But he didn't help himself at all, so he's one that's really possibly going to drop because of it.
Yeah, he's mostly a nickel. Mm-hmm. So he's got like a specialized position for the NFL. If they want to draft him, they have to have the role for him, basically. So he's kind of like how Cam Kinchins has to be for the Rams. He has to be in a specialty role, but he's good at it, so it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. We'll just have to see if Sebastian Castro finds the same type of home and can play at the same level. Next up, day 3. Wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks. This is everybody's favorite day. This is Saturday. They save it for Saturday because of all the big names and stuff. First one up there, Matthew Golden. He doesn't actually have a RAS score because of the fact that he only ran the 40, but he did really well. So it doesn't really matter what else he did. He had a 4.29. I will tell you right now, me and Cam talked about it prior because we were doing bets on Prize Picks and Underdog, and we did not expect this to be the fast guy.
Yeah.
I didn't see a 4.29 out of Matthew Golden on tape. I didn't. And so maybe I need to go back and rewatch the tape, or maybe he doesn't play that fast. Either one, whatever. But a 4.29 is huge for him, and that's going to basically lock him into a top five wide receiver if you include Travis Hunter. But at the same time, like he could be your 3rd wide receiver, and it wouldn't surprise me.
And that's something that I brought up in our top 50 big board was that he was 44, which was lower than a lot of people. Daniel Jeremiah has him right around and above. I think it was Luther Burden,
both
and Emeka Egbuka. Yeah. So we were like, that's a little high for our liking. We weren't exactly confident, but him in a weaker wide receiver class kind of locked himself in, which was good to see. But like you said, of all the Texas guys, like Jaden Blue was the highest projected running back, and then Isaiah Bond's talking that he's going to break the record, and then Matthew Golden slips by and is the one that's by far the fastest between the 3 of those guys. So that was very good to see for him.
Yeah, he was flying. And then the next couple guys are they killed the scoring at the wide receiver position. Jalen Noel, he blew me away a little bit. I did not expect the insane athleticism at all levels. I mean, he had a 4.39 40. Awesome. He had a 41.5-inch vert. He jumped 11.2 in the broad. His shuttle was a 4.17, and his 3-cone was a 6.82. All of those numbers are in the top 5 at the position. And then he went out and benched 23 times, which is 6 more than second place.
Yeah.
He just went crazy. I was just so surprised by how athletic and how I'm gonna have to go rewatch him type of thing. Like I'm like, okay,
yeah, and huge risers.
And I was like, he's also a great punt returner, and I knew that part. And I was like, well, they're on a team. He's on a team with Jaden Higgins and this and that, and okay, maybe he can't. Maybe he's not as good as like. No, he's good. He's very good. He had 1,000 yards this year, and it apparently was very warranted based on all of his testing. So.
Yeah, he's almost kind of checking all boxes, and then it's kind of like, well, why is he as low as we have him? So yeah, like you said, serious reevaluating for him and how high he could possibly vault at the wide receiver position.
And then Isaac Tesla from Arkansas, he also just went off, and he actually has I think it's top 10 of all players ever for the position. He is 6'3.5", 214 pounds. He ran a 4.43, 39.5-inch vert, 10.9 broad, and then a 4.05 shuttle, which is just moving in the shuttle. And then he had 17 bench reps, which, yes, I just said Javen Knoll had 23. Well, Tesla was second. So even knowing it was a big difference, it's still second for this year's class. So he did really well. He's obviously has an awesome score for his RAS score. So he killed it. And he's going to be reevaluated because he was probably one of those guys that we talked about as a 7th round, 6th round guy. And now you're like, okay, well, he could be vaulting himself into the 4th round, 5th round, and really pushing. And he did well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also just one more name, just kind of a similar story in athletics score that he killed it was Isaiah Nair, who's kind of battled injuries, been on a couple different teams. He went to Texas for a year,
right.
Got injured early, and then had to transfer out, and went to Nebraska, did pretty well this year, but he's just one of those like, he's older, not really going to do anything, but at 6'4", he ran like a 4.40 and, did a whole lot of athleticism as well. So just wanted to point him out. But running back position, that was something that we were hanging out and you were just like, man, I wish
every time we do this.
Yeah, I wish somebody would just do bad so that we could make our lives easier when ranking these guys because of how deep this position is. We've been, vaulting it up all year, all for a year and a half now of how good this class is. And again, they did not disappoint. Everybody was fast. Everybody looked great.
Everybody ran what I kind of either expected or better. Because, of course, everybody's going to be like, oh, Ollie Gordon ran in a 4.6. And I'm like, did you expect him to run faster? Probably not. Oh, Caleb Johnson, a 4.57. Okay, yeah, maybe he could have run in the low 4.5s, but I'm not surprised that he's a 4.57. Like, it's like, guys, they all killed it. And the top 3 that we're actually going to talk about are these 3 guys, but you could have put a couple other names on here. It's just, I got enough screen. I want to talk for hours. But these 3 guys, Bashal Tootin, okay, first off, there's no freaking way Bashal Tootin is this fast. I'm going to be honest, because I watched the film. There's no way. And I do want to point this out. I'm very happy with like what he did. He should be very proud of himself. But his 10-yard split was a 1.49, which is flying. And then everybody else trickling behind him, of course. But that was just so, like, the get out of the gate type of thing was just so much better than everyone that just set him apart as, like, okay, he's going to do better in this, like, thing because of that. He killed it. He was 0.06 above everybody else. Jaden Blue was second, who Cam mentioned as possibly being the fastest Texas guy, saying he was going to get a 4.1, possible thing. That didn't happen. Bashal Tootin was flying. And Quinshon Judkins, for his size... Oh, and let me go back, sorry. Bashal Tootin also jumped a 40.5 vertical and had a 10.10 broad. So, just adding that. Ridiculous. Quinshon Judkins... We saw him in, which game was it? Was it the semis or was it the finals where he had that big run?
I think it was the finals.
Was it a championship game? Okay, so he had that big run in the championship game. We both were like, that doesn't look like a 4.4 guy. That doesn't even look like it breaks 4.5. That run didn't really do anything for us. And then we watched, him obviously run a 4.48, which was very impressive for his size. And then jump a 38-inch vertical, 11-foot broad. Like, he was very explosive. Got the 9.88 rise score. 221 pounds, man. Like 6'2", 221. Like this is a really good athlete for his size. It's so clouded at the top of this running back class on what to do. Because I wouldn't be mad at you if you were like, Quinshon Judkins is my number 3 running back. There's 2 guys that are better than everybody else. Let's just be honest with that. But after that, Quinshon Judkins,
everybody's in contention.
Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, whoever you want to say, can be right there. So.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because, I was the one that brought up the point when we were texting back and forth during the championship. It was just like, man, he doesn't have top end speed, but it's like, okay, but that's not where he earns his money. He earns it on short yardage. He earns it by going in between the tackles and stuff like that. And he does well at what he does. So his 4.48 compared to like Travion Henderson's 4.43, if you compare the two together and you watch both of their film, the speed is not as close as those numbers suggest, because Travion Henderson is a burner top end breakaway guy that he turns on the jets as he keeps going, whereas Quinshon is very quick.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of
he tops out earlier,
which is fine because they're 2 different types of backs, and both of them are going to be very, very good in the NFL. But it's just fun to talk about, and they're always going to be compared just because they're both from Ohio State. But they're very, very different running backs, and neither of them are out of the discussion as RB3 or anything of that nature. Like you said, Omarion Hampton and Ginty have almost separated themselves in most people's boards and even mocks. Right before we even saw like Emil Kiper put Omarion Hampton 12th, and that was with Ginty at 6. So both of these guys are fringe round 1 guys, and neither are going to be shocking to be in those discussions with all these good playoff teams that probably want an upgrade in the run game.
I think the 4.48 from Quinshon Judkins was more impressive than the 4.43 from Travion Henderson by far.
For sure.
And I actually, I actually thought Quinshon Judkins looked really good in like the on-field work. Problem was, everybody did. So it was like one of those things where it's like, well, I could be like, yeah, that guy did great, but that guy did great. Like, we could have had a lot of names on here. I mean, there were a lot of good football players that went off this weekend. The next guy is DJ Giddens, and disclaimer, DJ is a top 10 guy to me in this class for the running back position. I really like what he can do. And then he came to the combine at 6'2", and ran a 4.43 and jumped a 39.5-inch vert and was more impressive personally to me than Quinshon Judkins was. So if that tells you anything, I was just raving on this guy. Well, DJ Giddens, I thought should have had the higher S score. I don't know how they calculate it, but to me, there's no way, if you look number by number, that I think Quinshon should be higher. So DJ had a hell of a week and made some money, honestly, because he's stuck in between this crazy group. Devin Neal, RJ Harvey, LaQuint Allen Jr., Trevor Etienne. There's 40 names I can actually, I can, we're going to talk about 30 guys on the freaking running backs video because I can't leave them out because they could all be guys. They're all 3rd round grades. DJ Giddens is legit though. And I was happy what he did.
Yeah, it's almost like, and I said this, like, I just want everybody to be match made to their team. So now we can re-rank them and be like, okay, now who do we like more based on where they landed? Because that's purely how we're going to end up seeing most of these careers play out. Because just because Ginty is the top running back in the class from a talent perspective, he could go to a weird situation and end up being the 5th most productive running back just year 1 alone.
Right.
Based on where he goes. It could be one of those things because any of these guys, we saw Bucky Irving, who's not like a workhorse running back, get workhorse usage and be one of the top fantasy options to the end of the season and a league winner because of the fact that he just inherited, all I got to be out is Rachaad White?
Yep.
Okay.
Wait till next year.
That's all I got to do. So
wait till next year when they draft somebody because I think there's probably 15 guys, minimum, that are better than Rachaad White, like in their first year. So what happens if they draft a Quinshon Judkins? I'll tell you right now, Bucky Irving will not play as much as everybody wants him to. Especially those guys that are like, I got him in Dynasty for free.
Or you get coaches similar to like Sean McVay who they don't want to do a 1A, 1B. They just want to ride somebody into the ground. Well, Kyron is another year of a ton of usage, and then say they draft somebody in the 3rd round this year and he goes down with another ankle injury because he's had a couple of those early in his career, and they're not going to pay him, obviously.
Yeah.
Whenever he becomes a free agent, I'm assuming it's next offseason. And then all of a sudden, late in the year, DJ Giddens is going for, fringe 1,000 yards on the Rams.
Over Blake Corum.
Yeah.
Because he's a better running back. So we'll get into that. And we're going to rank this year's class versus last year's class. So we'll have all those numbers too. And y'all can talk all the mess y'all want, because at the end of the day, production is going to come from opportunity, and opportunity is the team that they go to. It's not about, like Cam said, Genty might be the 5th best productive running back, even knowing he is the best running backs, like ability-wise. They're very different things. Going to the losers, though, there's no running backs on this list, just so everybody knows. They all did well. I'm being very serious about that. The losers, though, Tez Johnson, he is the craziest player ever, honestly. Like, 4'5". Okay, so he came in at 5'10", 154 pounds, and ran a 4'5", 140. And first off, those are all, everything I just said is like 0th percentile for everything. He has no upper echelon percentiles. And then you're like, okay, fine, whatever. And then his shuttle's a 4.15, and he's a number 2 player in the shuttle. And I'm like, what? Excuse me? So it's just, he's such an interesting player, because what he is good at is getting open. Like, he just knows how to get open. And I think this type of performance, obviously, like, he had a 6.65 3-cone. That's 0.1 better than everybody else. Like, that's how quick he is. But it does, like, can you draft a guy that's 155 pounds and be like, okay, I need you to go out there and separate against longer, bigger, more athletic guys?
Yeah, like,
I don't know, man.
I mean, as a comparison, Xavier Worthy, who just broke the 40 record, was 172. So, and people were like, oh yeah, he's a pogo stick that's just going to get torn up in the NFL, and I don't know if that speed can translate. Well, if you don't even have the speed to back up something that's 18 pounds lighter, like, what do you do with all that? That's a really, really, eye-opening thing.
But then you watched him at the Senior Bowl, and you're like, he was just getting away from everybody. It's like, I don't know what to do with this guy. I really don't. So we'll talk about him on another show when I have kind of come to grips with what everything is. But the next guy is Isaiah Bond. This is, probably most people's parlay killer and whatnot. But Isaiah Bond runs the 4.39, talking about how he's going to break the record. Does not do that, obviously. But one thing that was surprising to me is he ran the fastest mile per hour out of every player at the wide receiver position. He ran a 24.17 mile per hour. The second was Matthew Golden, who has 23.5. So he was moving. He just 1.53 start. That's not very good. Things like that. I think he's fast. On film, he's very fast. I think he's faster than Matthew Golden on film. But it doesn't matter if you can't, you have to take so much time to get to top speed. So I don't know. It was very interesting.
Yeah, he was one of those because he had a really down year in terms of performance. Obviously, also an ankle injury. So we can't discount like an ankle sprain. Like, oh, you're just supposed to miss a week and then be 100% or even 95% of what you are, especially if you're supposed to be a speed guy. But yeah, he really struggled at the end of the season. Like, and you could tell confidence was down because, like, prime example was the semifinals in like a 3rd and long, jumping to catch a pass that didn't need
that was
to
weird.
be jumped for when he was wide open. It was like, you don't typically see that from like high-end college receivers. So that was the whole thing, but he really could have rectified that with a great combine performance. He did not. I expect him to run faster at a pro day. That's what he really needs to, over the next couple weeks, like, prioritize is just
work
like,
on the start.
Exactly.
All the start. All in the start.
That's all I do. Like, just 5-yard.
Yes, over, because I can run fast after I get past 10 yards. It's fine. No, I completely agree. Only one guy on this list for quarterbacks. No quarterbacks were winners. Guess what, guys? And I want to get into this real quick, because quarterbacks, when they go, no one tested. There were 3 players that tested, 4 players that tested. 3 ran the 40, and then I think 4 jumped. Like that, nobody tested, which is fine because they don't have to. They're there to throw the football.
And none of them were really athletes other than like a Jalen Milroe. So
right.
We weren't expecting like, oh, this kind of really needs to go down.
Yeah. And then basically everybody else that was throwing was just okay. Like, even like Jackson Dart probably was the best out of the group. And then I think Quinn Ewers was second. But at the same time, Jackson Dart and Quinn Ewers, to me, have the best arms. That was never a question. Like, both of those 2 guys have the best arms out of everybody that's at this at the pro day or at the combine. I think Jalen Milroe has a good arm in if it's like in certain ways, but he wasn't nearly as like sharp because he's not an accuracy guy. So with that being said, like we're not going to find guys that are, we're not going to give good grades to people just for doing what they were supposed to do. We will give bad grades to people that missed throws. Now, Dylan Gabriel had a very tough day when it came to just throwing the ball. And I was surprised because I feel like he's a guy that has good accuracy and works on with timing. And of course, these are new receivers and stuff, but like you have to be able to adjust a little bit. And so I was really surprised that he did so poorly in actually just throwing the football around in general. And because he was pretty accurate in college. He had 82.2 adjusted passer percentage, which is really good. So I was really surprised that he was just having such a tough day, overthrowing guys and things like that.
And on top of that, he of this class is by far the most experienced guy too, because obviously, essentially, 6 full years in college, only played 5 because 1 year he went with a significant injury in his last year at UCF. But at the end of the day, like, you're already small, so you have to kind of combat that with great performances. And quarterbacks, if you're not, a huge like burner, then you're going to be having to prove that by throwing. And so him and even Will Howard just were notable names that just kind of really didn't live up to that. And I've seen some quarterbacks like Shadur like publicly defended Will Howard, and it's just like, hey, at the end of the day, when you're trying to get to an elite business where there's only 32 jobs and 10 of those are being ready to be replaced on a year-to-year basis, like we have to nitpick at the little things. And so if you don't do things that we expected you to be good at and you were poor at them, like that's very, very notable, especially if you're in a class that's just completely wide open at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of things like people were like, Brady Cook played well. I'm like, yeah, fine, whatever. They were like me personally, I thought Tyler Schaff, sure, like he's good arm, like things like that. Like this combine wasn't impressive in like the way like where they were making them throw in certain ways. They weren't doing anything crazy. They were just throw the ball here and arc it. Throw the ball here and put pace on it. It wasn't like they were making them do anything outside the box. So I wasn't really looking for anything. But accuracy, I was like, okay, accuracy is the most important thing then here. And Dylan Gabriel had the worst of it too. Day 4. These are the big boys. Yeah, the offensive line. And we've talked about the first 2 a few times. I believe we actually had Ariante Erstream higher than everybody on our board because he's a fringe first rounder to us, and then I believe Daniel Jeremiah had him at outside the top 50. I don't know where Mel has him, but like the big guys, they're a little bit lower on him. Well, they're done being lower on him after this most recent combine because Ariante Erstream went out there and just killed it. He, for a guy that is 6'6", 330 pounds, he ran a 5.01. Now, that looks a lot better if it's a 4.99, I get it. But, like, that's not a very big difference, of course. He ran that and then went out and just had very good movement skills. He was really impressive, man. I was really, really excited to see what he was able to do, and he killed it. He absolutely killed it.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that, like, scheme fit would just work excellent with certain teams, especially on the back end. So, like, on our big board, he was 39th, which obviously if there's 32 first-rounders, that's like second-round pick being in the back end. But at the end of the day, when you're, first to second-round pick, you're splitting hairs on a lot of talent because everything's kind of about the same, especially a year like this year. So, yeah, him doing wonders athletically really kind of helped his case into where, I think we put him to Baltimore in our first mock.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Like, it makes you feel even better that if that happens, making that like an A plus kind of decision to move forward with him.
Yeah, and then and also like with him, he's right on the cusp of like, is he a good enough pass blocker? And he kind of put that stuff to bed with his like athleticism scores too. So that was really good to see just for him as in general. The next guy though, Armand Membu, and I've been talking about Membu. And I said to you, I don't know, what was it? Probably early January. Mm-hmm. I was like, hey, I think, most people are going to hate this offensive tackle class because I'm not as high on the people that everybody else is high on. You know, there's these random guys that I'm like hearing about and then go and watch their film. I'm like, damn, that guy's good. You know, this is one of those guys. Armand Mimbu was one of our first round talents. He got a first round grade. He's higher on our board than most boards, and then he goes out and runs a. He's 6'4", which is good because he's on his Missouri like bio. He's 6'3".
Mm-hmm.
That little extra inch is a lot for these like we talk about just like if he's 6'3", he's probably a guard. If he's 6'4", he could be a tackle.
Mm-hmm.
He had 33.5-inch arms. He's 332 pounds. He ran a 4.9 140. He jumped a 34-inch vertical, and then jumped a 9'7" broad. Those are all numbers that are like he is a physical freak, is what that means. Like I don't remember who puts out the freaks list, but he should have been on it. Basically, is what I'm getting at here. Mm-hmm. And so he is a guy that I think is a lock for a top 15 pick. And there's plenty of teams that need either guard or tackle in the top 15. So I don't see him getting outside of that. And he might even go over guys like, and we've talked about this, but he might go over Kelvin Banks. He might go over Tyler Booker and these other guys to play the same position as those guys. So I think that he's going to be a very important player in this draft, and he's going to rise on everybody's board, but he's already there for us. So we're good. We're ahead of that.
Yeah, and I also saw a tweet that, and again, take it with a grain of salt because we know Tyreek Hill is historically fast, but his top speed in his 40 was faster than Tyreek Hill's fastest speed this season.
Interesting.
That's how quick his top speed was, which was incredible, and he's already known to be an athletic guy. So to put that on, not just on tape, but on the numbers for the combine was a big thing. And you've been early on him as well because he's been higher than most, like you said. But you even brought up when we were first doing our first mock, and we were spitballing because it's all speculation in late January, early February, because you don't know what moves are made and stuff like that. But you were like, honestly, my favorite fit for Dallas fans, polarized, and plus I guess by default that's my team. You were like Armand Mimbu. That would be the guy. And on top of that, now that Zach Martin's gone, it makes even more sense because I don't want just Terrence Steele and it's a lot of bad. It's a lot of bad, So very, very interesting. But the thing is, even if Dallas is looking to upgrade the offensive line with their first pick, because of how well he performed, he might not even make it to 12.
Right. But that also does mean that Kelvin Banks could be there. That does mean that Will Campbell,
Right.
So we'll have to get into the Will Campbell conversation another day, but I do think he's a guard. That's all I'm gonna put there. Next up, the pair of okay, so Jackson Slater and Jared Wilson, both of them killed it, score wise. But Jackson Slater's out of Sacramento State. He is a small school guy. 6'3", 311, 32-inch arms, 10-inch hands, really big hands. Not as big as some of these other guys, but that's solid. He had a 5.0 140 and a 28.5-inch vert, a 9-inch broad, or 9-foot broad. Good athlete. But more so than that, what he showed at the Senior Bowl and combining it to what he did in the Combine, it's like, okay, now you should not be scared to draft this guy at all. Like, it's like he did all the things right throughout this process. He is building. He's almost like Gray Zabel at a smaller level, because Gray Zabel jumped a 36.5 vert. He would be on this board if he ran a 40. But, Jackson Slater, it's like, okay, he's done the right things. Maybe he's a fourth rounder. Maybe he's back into the third round, kind of guy.
He's just one of those value picks that you just feel like you're going to really like.
Yeah.
Wherever he goes.
Mason McCormick. Mm-hmm. We talked about him last year. We were big, he's a guy that's probably not going to make our rankings. But if you get him for what he's probably going for, you're going to be very happy with what you're getting. And Jared Wilson, Jared Wilson's the top 100 player. That's all I got to say about that. Like, he's absolutely a top 100 player. 6'3", 310. He had a 4.84. I mean, Amembu literally dropped his mouth. I watched the video. It was hilarious when it happened. 32-inch vert, 9.4 broad, and then a 4.56 shuttle, which is flying. Absolutely flying for this size. He's just going to be a guy that, and he's a center. He's a center for Georgia. He's just going to be a guy that is going to be good, and he's better than he had to sit behind Van Pran last year for multiple years. It was a 3-year starter, and finally Jared Wilson got his chance, and now he's next to Dylan Fairchild and Tate Rutledge and all these guys, but he might be the best of the three. He might be the best lineman they had this year over Xavier Truss and Ernest Green, and he's a top 100 player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Chad Reuter, who works for NFL.com, he does a lot of rankings and he implements a lot of trades in his mocks, which I think is fun. And also, he does multi-round drafts, so he's very in depth into it. He said that he solidified himself as a top 50 pick, so that's even more of a hammer down with how much he loved him. So
nice.
One of those things, like you said, not a ton of experience because he was just kind of held back, but he's made the most of it. And then on top of that, the drills, he looked awesome and fluid as well.
Yeah, he's just good at football, and I'm excited because I think he's a name that's gonna rise. But we're not going to release anything too soon. But he's a name that's gonna rise, and he'll be one of the guys we're higher on than I think some people. And then lots of good scores up there, all nines, guys. There are some favorites in this world, and I had some reservations. I've seen this guy all the way up at 13. I've seen this guy on our board in the 20s. He's probably going to be falling. That is Tyler Booker. Interior offensive lineman, 4.15 score. He ran a 5.38 40. All he is big. That's it. And I'll tell you what, I wrote this on my thing when I did my first scout of him. And what I said was, he reminds me of the same things I thought of J.C. Latham. That's what he made me feel like. And I was like, of course they play for the same school. Of course they're the same size. Whatever. Right. I'm just making stuff up. It's just me seeing whatever. No, he's that. And J.C. Latham was a better athlete, but I was like, yeah, this just makes me feel J.C. Latham-esque. 6'5", 321, 34.5-inch arms and 11-inch hands. Huge mountain of a man. Absolutely mountain. But he had awful scores. He jumped a 7 foot 1 inch broad. I just told you about 9-footers. Everybody that we talked about on the last page was a 9-foot broad jump. He had jumped a 7 foot 1 inch broad. Mm-hmm. Slowest 3-cone, I believe, overall. He might have lost. He might have been saved by somebody that was just like really, really slow. But
his 20 shuttle was also slow.
Yeah, everything was bad. I don't know what to do with him, honestly, because me personally, I wasn't as high as some people, but I didn't want to completely not have him in there because of the fact that, he is a very tantalizing player. He's a big guy. I feel like some of the hardest positions for me to scout are interior offensive linemen sometimes, because there's just a lot of stuff they just don't do. They're just in there and they might not block on one play and they might do something, it's just a long process for them. But I don't know. Everybody wants to say he has very clean tape, and some people compare his tape to Joe Alt, and I'm like, that's definitely not what I'm seeing here. So we're gonna have to go back and rewatch, and we're gonna have to just redo his complete evaluation, because otherwise I'm gonna have to figure out how to rank him without it, and that would be a absolute disaster. So we're gonna rewatch his film, redo his evaluation. Take into consideration that he's not a great athlete, because I thought that he was going to be a good athlete. There was a lot of reports that he was a pretty good athlete, and then this came out, and that really hurt maybe I should have trusted myself a little bit more on this one, I guess. But 13th for Daniel Jeremiah.
He was 20. That's exactly what I was going to bring up. On our big board, he was 25th on our first look, but that's on the low end for a lot of people. He's like a top 15 pick in a lot of mocks prior to the combine. And like you said, Daniel Jeremiah, who we kind of follow the most because he kind of aligns a lot with how we view and feel with players. And I bet you he will definitely drop him as well. So he's one that definitely needs to look into going forward. I will say he is one of the youngest offensive linemen in this entire class. He doesn't turn 21 until mid-April. So young guy that's already has size, but it's just one of those things that you gotta take a second look at.
Based on his size, I thought he was gonna play tackle. Like, as soon as I got the measurements, and I was like, wow, this is a tackle. And then I was like, okay, cool. And then watched his running, watched everything, and I was like, oof, never mind. I don't know if he just not a good athlete, and that's okay. There's a lot of bad athletes that have come out and done well. Dominic Mooney last year, we had him on the losers list. He had a terrible combine. But guess what? He went and played well. He's one of the best interior offensive linemen that Went to San Francisco, but
I
it's
mean,
like,
yeah, he was still first team All American last year, so it's not like he didn't do or play well and have a lot of hype or have it warranted going in, but it's just one of those things that you got to take the second look at, like we said.
was he really first team?
Mm-hmm.
That was second team. I'm not tripping. For AP or for?
I didn't look at
Okay.
the exact.
No, you're good. No, you're good. I believe I bet he was an All American somewhere. But that's the type of player he is. I just didn't expect him to be this unathletic. So we'll take a second look, guys, and we'll get back to y'all, of course, on it and make sure we get the rankings right. But I'm going to stop sharing. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us. That is our recap video. We're trying to get it out as fast as possible to y'all so y'all can check it out. And hopefully y'all agree, and hopefully it was beneficial to y'all to watch this. Just kind of hearing some names, even some names that you might not have heard before.
Yeah, and there wasn't as much to take away from it in previous combines because of so many high-end players just either opting out or just not performing well, coming off injury, all that stuff. So not a ton to take away from in terms of rankings going up or down or big movers with these things. But it was still fun to watch and kind of dive deep into in a year or two of doing this, because last year, obviously, a lot of you guys probably didn't watch our first looks of combine reactions and first rankings and stuff. But if you go back and go through the awkwardness of how we're doing our first videos and stuff like that, because that was the first stuff that we attacked. We were right about a lot of stuff. You absolutely crushed last year's draft, and you're doing a great job in it this year. And it's just been fun to watch. And all of a sudden now we're in the pro day and about to get into free agency. So really gonna start ramping up in terms of reacting to mocks, making more mocks, all that fun stuff. And it's just a whole lot of stuff. And on top of that, prospect rankings for each position is going to be what we're majorly diving into this month.
Yep, it's gonna be excuse me. It's gonna be a lot of fun. We'll do another mock draft. We're gonna have 3 total mock drafts. We'll have another big board top 100. We'll do some mock the mocks. We'll do what would we do mocks, because I'm not gonna do the same thing as what I expect these teams to do. So it'll be a lot of fun going through everything, and hopefully y'all join the process and enjoy it with us. And then we go to fantasy football, and then we have the season, and we do it all over again. So
and if you've tuned in this far, we appreciate you guys putting eyes on us. Please like the video, comment something what stood out to you this past weekend, and then if you haven't already subbed, please sub. We're on the road to 250, and we're going to keep on cranking and keep on going up and up, grow this community. So please, it's free. It's all you can do is just support us in that way, and it helps go a long way to where we can keep on growing and get exposure out to where we actually do this more and more often, which is what we've really wanted to start doing.
for sure. So we appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and we'll see you on the next one.